In Haiti, health authorities have registered 594 deaths from cholera and 32,141 suspected cases, almost 5 months after the resurgence of the disease. Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered his annual address to the Federal Assembly to report on the main objective of the nation's domestic and foreign policies. In Morocco, people protest in front of parliament against the rising cost of food and fuel, defying the government's ban on marches. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. We do so in Haiti. Health authorities have registered 594 deaths from cholera and over 32,000 suspected cases, almost 5 months after the resurgence of the disease. According to the National Ministry of Health and Population, 2,000 confirmed cases were reported in the 10 departments of the country, together with 22,469 are suspected cases and more than 28,300 hospitalizations with symptoms related to the pathology. The outbreak of cholera reappeared 3 years after the last recorded case, and the current increase in reported cases occurs in the midst of a severe social, political, economic, and security crisis that has limited the access of thousands of citizens to medical assistance. In addition, the highest number of cases corresponds to the capital and its surrounding cities that are under the influence of armed gangs, responsible for thousands of deaths and kidnappings in 2022. In the framework of her visit to Cuba, Colombian Vice President Francia Marquez gave an interview to the independent media outlet Valley of the Peace, in which she highlighted the many challenges her government faces in Colombia, including national education and ending the systematic exclusion of women as well as Black and indigenous people.
I think we haven't progressed as much in Colombia as we would like. There are still many educational challenges in terms of guaranteeing access, guaranteeing permanency, but also in terms of critical education, another type of education that does not erase us, but rather help us to continue emancipating ourselves. And that starts with reading. It starts with the books that we read. The official history of Colombia is not one that was written with Black or indigenous people, or it did so, but in a pejorative way. Whenever people of African descent and indigenous people were mentioned, they were slaves.
Instead of enslaved people.
But they didn't tell us that we were enslaved. They didn't tell us that part. Now we see Black women telling their own stories. It's not somebody speaking in their name, but rather they themselves, narrating their experiences, their stories, their lives, speaking about their environments. I think that's a transformation that is happening, and Colombia is going through it now.
In this context, the Colombian leader emphasized her country's gratitude towards Cuba for its transcendental role in the peace process led by Gustavo Petro's administration.
I think that this new relationship needs to be one of gratitude, of Colombia thanking Cuba. In the midst of scarcity, in the midst of the U.S. blockade, Cuba opened its doors to hundreds of Colombian students who have come to study medicine here. And that is Cuba's gift, not just to Colombia, but to the world. And it is incredible how a nation that is economically blockaded is exporting to the entire world science and medicine. Second, Cuba has played a transcendental role in the path to peace that we have initiated in our country. Cuba has been there for us, and it has paid a price for that because the U.S. has placed Cuba on its list of countries that sponsor terrorism.
Chile's government announced on Tuesday there are 4 fires of concern due to their proximity to populated areas in the south, where fires have claimed the lives of 25 people and have left over 7,000 homeless since the beginning of the month. Firefighters from the Spanish Military Emergencies Unit joined their Chilean counterparts to battle the fierce flames in Santa Ana in the Biobío region. Although the situation began to improve 10 days ago, the government said at the moment that some outbreaks were still out of control, while far from inhabited areas. However, the situation changed last Friday when high temperatures and winds returned. Fires broke out again in Santa Ana, forcing people to evacuate their homes. The fires have already made 2023 the second worst year in terms of hectares burned after the firestorm that hit the country in 2017. The death toll from the heavy rains that have hit the coast of the Brazilian state of Sao Paulo on Tuesday rose from 40 to 44 deaths, while the number of missing remains at around 40. Official sources reported that the hardest hit area is the municipality of São Sebastião, where 43 deaths have been registered in what is already one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the region. The area endured a record level of rainfall in the history of the country, with more than 680 millimeters in 24 hours. Meanwhile, the other fatality was recorded in the town of Ubatuba. Due to the climatic event, some 2,500 people have been forced to leave their homes and take temporary shelter in the homes of relatives, schools, and headquarters of civil society organizations. More than 600 troops, including army soldiers, are continuing uninterrupted rescue and search efforts to locate the missing and save people who have been stranded in communities in the area. On Tuesday, people in Madagascar are getting ready as Tropical Cyclone Freddy gets closer to the eastern Malagasy coast. The city of Manakara is expected to be on the front line of the cyclone. Residents are doing their best to prepare for the storm, which is expected to bring strong winds and flooding. Tropical Cyclone Freddy is set to hit eastern Madagascar on Tuesday, weakening slightly after brushing Mauritius with strong winds and torrential rains, according to observers. Meteorologists said they expected the weather phenomenon to make landfall on the island's east coast Tuesday night, with winds of up to 120 kilometers per hour. In Spain, the Ministry of the Ecological Transition warned on Tuesday that Spain's water reservoirs are at 50.6% of their capacity. The water situation in the country continues to be marked by the effects of drought, and authorities warn of low water reserves. The latest data from the entity indicates that reserves reached 28,356 cubic hectometers of water, a figure below the average of the last decade. Precipitation has been practically null throughout the country, and according to the ministry, the maximum amount of 16.6 millimeters of rainfall occurred in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. The state meteorology agency pointed out the lack of rainfall means that Spain has entered an incipient long-term drought. In Italy, Venice's local tide monitoring authorities reported the city's canals are experiencing unusually low tides. In a report published on Tuesday, the agency added the water reached 66 centimeters below the average lagoon level, with many canals running dry. Venice traditionally sailors, known as gondolieri, and public transport experienced major disruption as they had to change routes to avoid shallows. In this sense, the Tide Monitoring Authority explained the low water levels are caused mainly by dry weather and tidal change. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, delivered his annual address to the Federal Assembly on Tuesday to report on the main directions to be taken in domestic and foreign policy. The Russian president assessed the special military operation in Ukraine and the international situation before deputies, senators, military commanders, religious leaders, and other guests. The president's message included both political, economic, and ideological provisions and specific proposals in the field of legislative work of both chambers of the Russian parliament. During his speech, Putin stressed that his government did everything that was possible to peacefully resolve the Ukrainian crisis, but behind its back a completely different scenario was being prepared. He also said that the special military operation launched a year ago is aimed at protecting the population of our historic lands. Regarding the nation's economy, Putin said that sanctions imposed by the West against the country seek the suffering of the Russian people. However, he stressed that his government has implemented measures to avoid this objective.
Before the beginning of the special operation, heavy weapons deliveries were negotiated with Kiev. We remembered Kiev's attempt to seize nuclear weapons. The United States and NATO deployed near our borders their military bases and biological laboratories, prepared everything necessary for the Kiev regime for a big war. Today they publicly recognize it.
While speaking in his State of the Nation address, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Moscow was suspending its participation in the New START treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the United States.
They want to inflict a strategic defeat on us and try to keep to our nuclear facilities. In this regard, I'm forced to announce today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty. I repeat, we are not withdrawing from the pact, no. We are suspending our participation.
After the announcement, the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Jens Stoltenberg, asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to reconsider the decision to suspend participation in the Strategic Arms Treaty and stressed that this would dismantle the entire architecture of arms control. Stoltenberg considered that Russia's action goes against the norms that, he said, have taken decades to build. After NATO's reaction, Putin clarified once again that the country was only suspending compliance with the treaty and stated the lack of transparency of France and the United Kingdom in the accounting of their own arsenals and ammunition shipments to Ukraine explains the measure. The Russian Foreign Ministry on Tuesday summoned the U.S. ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, to increase involvement of Washington in the Ukraine conflict, especially in regards to the supply of arms and information to Kiev. Through a statement, Moscow protested the increasing involvement of the United States in the armed conflict and summoned Tracy together with a U.S. diplomatic mission to the Russian Foreign Ministry on February 21st. According to the Russian diplomacy, the delivery of weapons to Ukrainian troops and the provision of information on targets for attacks against Russia demonstrate the falsehoods in U.S. claims that Washington is not a party to the conflict. In turn, the Foreign Ministry demanded explanation from the White House for the explosions registered last September in Nord Stream gas pipelines, while calling on Washington not to interfere in the investigations. While visiting Poland, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni had a telephone conversation with U.S. President Joe Biden in which they discussed the conflict in Ukraine. According to a statement released on Tuesday by the presidency of the Italian Council of Ministers, Biden called Meloni as he returned to Polish territory after his brief visit to Kiev. The two leaders discussed their ongoing close coordination in support of Ukraine, including assistance in security, economic, and humanitarian issues. Hours before, Meloni had spoken with the Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, as well as with the head of state of that country, Andrzej Duda, regarding the conflict between Kiev and Moscow, the migratory crisis, and other matters of international and regional interest. In the next few hours, Meloni will arrive in Kiev, where she will reaffirm her support to President Volodymyr Zelensky. Meanwhile, in the United States, peace advocates will call on lawmakers in the House of Representatives on Tuesday to hold arms shipment to Ukraine and seek diplomatic ways to end the conflict between Kiev and Moscow. According to local media, the activists will go to the office of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries to deliver a letter calling for a ceasefire and peace talks. During the visit to the legislature, the activists will urge their representatives to issue a public statement calling on the nation's leader to make urgent diplomatic efforts to end hostilities, promote talks between the warring parties, and oppose sending fighter jets to Ukraine. They will also call for hearings to investigate allegations about the sabotage of Nord Stream natural gas pipelines revealed by U.S. journalist Seymour Hersh in a recent article. China's foreign ministry claimed on Monday that the United States has killed 900,000 people since 2001 under the pretext of the war against terrorism. The issued document explained that out of the total people killed since 2001, a total of 335,000 were civilians. In the report, China's foreign ministry emphasized that the United States has abused its hegemony in the world to profit and create hostility and instability in other countries. He also pointed out that the government of China seeks to draw international attention to the dangers of U.S. behavior to peace and stability in the world and to the well-being of the peoples of the world. In this regard, the Chinese government also denounced Washington's selfishness in the political, military, economic, technological, and cultural fields. We have more news coming up after a fun short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. On Monday, at least 6 people were killed and 300 injured after 2 new earthquakes of magnitude 6.6 and 5.8 were recorded south of Turkey. According to Turkish media, 294 people were injured in the southeastern province of Hatay. 18 of them are in serious conditions and have already been transferred to the cities of Adana and Dordogne. The Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Center reported that the earthquake was registered 9 kilometers from Antakya in Turkey and 75 kilometers from the Syrian city of Latakia at a depth of 10 kilometers. The telluric movement were perceived in Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, and Cyprus. In Morocco, a protest in front of Parliament in Rabat denounced the rising cost of food and fuel, defying the government's ban on marches. The protests were called by the Moroccan National Front, an umbrella organization for human rights associations, leftist parties, and trade unions. Demonstrators were complaining about the lack of access to education and healthcare, and about not being able to afford food nor fuel. Veteran activist Khadija Riyadi, a member of the Moroccan Human Rights Association, said the fact that protests do not gather many people is due to the government's ban on protests and absolute control over the media. On Tuesday, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad paid a working visit to the Sultanate of Oman, where he was welcomed at the royal private airport by His Majesty the Sultan Haitham bin Tariq. During the talks, His Majesty the Sultan reiterated his condolences to President al-Assad and the Syrian people for the victims of the devastating earthquake that shook the region, and confirmed his country's continued support to Syria to overcome the effects of the quake, the repercussions of the war, and the siege imposed on the Syrian people. On his part, President al-Assad expressed his deep appreciation to Sultan Haitham bin Tariq, the Omani government, and to the Omani people for their solidarity and support to the Syrian Arab Republic and for sending relief aid. Al-Assad said his country's greater appreciation is for Oman's support throughout the terrorist war launched against Syria. In Afghanistan, an explosion was reported on Tuesday near a mosque in central Kabul. The explosion was recorded near the Abul Faz shrine. However, authorities are not yet releasing any information on possible casualties or damage. The police in the area indicated that the investigation is still ongoing, noting that as from the Taliban takeover, several incidents of this type have occurred in the country. A similar explosion took place on February 4th in Kabul city, in which 2 people were injured. In Nigeria, on Monday, local health authorities reported that the death toll from Lassa fever has risen to 85 since the beginning of the year. According to the latest update by Nigeria's Center for Disease Control, this year they have registered a total of 531 cases for a fatality rate of 16%. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and so far 79 local government areas across 20 states have recorded at least 1 confirmed case this year. The predominant age group affected is 21 to 30 years, and it affects men and women alike. Humans usually get infected through exposure to food or household items contaminated by the urine or feces of infected mastomys rats. In some cases, it has similar symptoms to malaria, including fever, fatigue, weakness, and headaches, which appear between 1 and 3 weeks after the exposure to the virus. We have come to the end of this newspaper. From you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.